Improvement and Services Committee for September 28th, 2022. Roll call, Alder Stoyer, I'm here. Alder Campbell.
Here.
And Alder Eck.
Here.
And Alder Wery has been excused, so we do have a quorum. Approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Eck. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Campbell. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed. That passes unanimously. Approval of the minutes.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion by Campbell. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Eck. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed. That passes unanimously. Regular business, number 1. Consideration with possible action on request by Department of Public Works to institute a service fee for collection of yard waste outside of citywide curbside collection programs. Held at the September 14th, 2022 Improvement and Services Committee meeting. Staff.
Tonight I delivered to you at your desk a copy of a worksheet that we use to develop this chart. Typically what we like to do is recover our cost. It's a service fee, so all we're trying to do is recover the cost of providing that service. So the financial supervisor worked this up. So what you're seeing is the labor and equipment costs. We would be looking at a minimum of 15 minutes travel that gets somebody to the site and back, because we would dispatch out of either the east or west side garage as appropriate, and a minimum 5 minutes on site for the actual cleanup. So taking into account direct labor, equipment, and indirect cost, which is the $20, that would be administrative staff time to prepare the invoice and submit that invoice, we would be looking at a minimum charge of $104 to come out and pick up somebody's pile of grass that they've left out outside of the spring yard waste collection and fall loose leaf cleanup. While that is the actual cost that we anticipate, the second item I provided to you is a subset of the Green Bay fee schedule that we recently adopted at council. And in there I call particular attention on page 9 to 13, bulk collection. If somebody places a pile of bulk out for collection, we're currently charging $95 for 0 to 3 cubic yards of bulk. And an early set-out violation, somebody puts their cart out for collection on the wrong day, that's a $61 charge. So we just want you to be advised that if we were to adopt this fee schedule as we're proposing, if somebody puts grass clippings out and we have to go get those, we're going to be charging more than if we picked up 3 cubic yards of bulk.
Of course, I think what I'm concerned about is that the citizenry at large won't maybe understand that or know it. I mean,
They won't, but if somebody were to get a grass, if somebody were to look at because this charge will actually wind up as part of that table next year when we pass the charges citywide, for the entire city. So we'll be part of that table next year. The number's justified. I can say that. It's just we want you to be advised that it is steeper than some of our other solid waste collection charges.
Will this be on the website then? I mean, eventually, if this is
Correct.
approved?
Yes.
So this, I have a question.
Okay, all the record.
Sorry.
Well,
I'm over here.
she jumped.
Yeah.
See, huh? All the record.
No, so what is your recommendation then?
Our recommendation is to adopt the fee schedule as we've calculated it, but we wanted to provide some comparison, and we do want you guys, we understand, even though the numbers demonstrate at times, there are other considerations we need to take into account. So we just want you making a decision with eyes wide open before you do so. We want to give you all the information we can.
Well, so my guess is that the 95 has not had this breakdown done.
It has.
Okay. So
Typically, when we're out on bulk, there's more bulk out there, and we're running out with a bulk crew. Now here, what we've got, there's a truck and a skid steer as opposed to, and I'm not 100% positive what's included in the
For bulk,
bulk charge.
it's a front end loader and a dump truck.
So I think the anticipation is that those folks make more stops. You're gaining an economy of scale, if you want to think of it that
Oh,
way.
okay, so it brings down the cost because they're doing more of them.
More stops,
Okay, because that is a tough one,
yes.
to charge more for that than a bulk pickup, for grass clippings or whatever.
And I did go back and challenged operations staff. Can we look at a more efficient way to go out and do the collection? And this actually winds up being the most efficient way to do it.
Sounds like you're still sending a truck and a crew out there, so even though it's a different kind of load, you're still sending that out, so that's part of it.
Right.
But it costs more than a bulk pickup. Okay, so how,
Anything else? Yeah,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. Oh, go ahead.
How are we gonna, it's gonna be on the website, but is there like a warning or something?
Generally speaking, what we have done is, even with the fall and spring cleanup periods, with folks placing stuff into the road as opposed to leaving it on the terrace, we have advised individuals that the city has the right, but we have not necessarily, we're not invoiced for that yet. The intent is to do so. We're working on the logistics of that. Historically, we have given a grace, even with bulk collection and some of these other things. It has been customary to get a warning before you get a charge.
And similar to people whose grass gets above 8 inches, and the city ordinance says no taller than 8, they get a fair warning before we would go out, DPW would go out and cut the grass.
So you pick it up
Similar to
once,
the
but
yard waste.
say,
The second time you gotta
just be aware.
But
So did this start?
Well,
I
and
know we just-
oftentimes, we will just
Hang tag.
send the invoice. But if somebody contests that invoice and we find out that this is the first invoice they've received, we'll rescind that invoice upon them contesting it.
what if you have a problem property, let's say that happens 2 or 3 times? You get a warning, you get a fine. So ignorance is bliss, if these people are, wait a
I pay
minute.
my taxes.
All that kind of stuff. But, if you get a warning, and then you get the citation, if it happens a couple of times, do you have record of that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and I think that would be key. If you can see that there's a problem situation, it's like you've been warned.
And again,
So
it's not that we
that's-
just blanket give the warning the first time out. We've been doing that with the fall and spring collection periods. But for something like this, it's not a citation, it's not a fine, it's actually a charge for service. So we actually went out, performed a service, we incurred cost as a result of that. So we'll send the invoice, but if somebody gets an invoice, it's their first offense, and they contact us, they send an email, send a letter, this is the circumstance, and we research the records and we find out that it is their first offense. First offenses generally are rescinded.
And even
So, two
DPW.
questions. Did we discuss this, like, outside the city, but it's in the city, but we actually don't send staff out there? That was discussed at last council meeting, wasn't it? When we discussed outside of where regular pickup isn't done all the time. Was that part of this discussion?
I don't think so.
To get here? Do you know what I'm talking about? We talked about on the very outside where that you almost gotta go, it's the city, but it's not a scheduled, regular, all the time kind of thing. I was maybe misunderstanding, no?
Yeah, I'm not recollecting that, but
Okay,
we provide garbage service to the outskirts.
that's what I'm getting,
Yeah.
but maybe that's what we were
Well,
talking
they were,
about.
I think they might have been talking about recycling. There might have been something on that. Because we go outside to other communities,
Oh.
but that's kind of a county thing, I think.
All right, so I, one question example. The old 97-year-old lady next door, she picks up every stick on her property every week and puts them out there. They get picked up, But I know she's not getting billed for it, she'd be telling me. But it's the little, I mean, just the little sticks, you know?
She isn't getting invoiced yet.
She's been doing it since I lived there.
Right.
No, I understand.
Every week she has a
And
little
that's-
pile out there.
We want to stop that behavior.
Yeah. And I kind of, like, once in a while, I'll go to the yard dump with my waste
And
and
you
I'll
pick it
grab
up.
it and pick it up and help her
And,
out. Just,
you know-
I know she hates it, you know?
If we've got engaged community partners, people in your neighborhood who are willing to step up and help out with it, our goal is not to
Well,
charge a
and it-
90-year-old lady for picking up these little piles of sticks, but it's also not, you can see by the costs, this is what it's costing us to send those trucks out there to pick up that
Special.
little pile of sticks.
I know.
A special.
And
Yeah.
that's taking
Right
staff away from, during, so during
Non-collection periods.
non-collection periods, is this a sanitation or is this is actually a street function?
No, this is, yeah, it's a street function.
Okay, so street section is the one who's tasked with this job, which means those are the guys who are doing crack sealing, those are the guys who are doing pothole patching, those are the guys who are doing road maintenance during the summer, and every time they gotta go out and go around the city to pick up these piles of grass clippings and little piles of sticks, that's time they're not spending taking care of major issues.
That shifts the core duties for that period.
Alderaan.
I think that, honestly, I think that our citizens are pretty spoiled. And, I mean, and I don't mean
Yeah,
to make it
no.
sound like, they don't even realize just how much. Because I lived in a different community and it was totally different. They hardly took anything and it was like, holy cow, I'm used to Green Bay. So I think it is something that people didn't even realize that they were doing it outside of times. I just think that's what it is. They just are ignorant of it, you know, they don't know
They
the
get sticks
rules.
piled up and they just say, hey, you know, let's put it out there, the city is there, we're
Yeah,
paying
if
taxes,
they
so
come
pick
get
it
them,
up.
so I'll
And if
just
they
keep putting
picking
them
it
up.
up.
But
They
you're
keep
right,
putting it
there
out
is a
there.
cost, there is a
Yeah,
cost, there's
yeah.
time.
Well, I mean, it's on the way to the dump. I mean, hundreds of city
Yeah.
trucks go by, including the payloaders that go down every day, you know?
So with the sticks and stuff that people put in the street, I mean, that's an issue too.
Well, as long as it's half-inch diameter or bigger, then that classified as brush, and that is a service we provide at no charge year-round.
That's what
Brush.
she's throwing out.
Correct.
I know
But it
that's-
also has to have length, it has to be like 6 to 8
4 feet,
long.
oh, that was like 4 to 6 feet or something like that.
Okay.
I've seen the rules on that.
Yeah, but when they put it, instead of putting it on your terrace, they're putting it in the road, you know, that's a
Well,
concern.
now when we're talking, you're talking something completely different. Now,
Well-
when we're talking about placing in the road versus leaving on the terrace, that's actually an ordinance violation because that's a problem with our
But the
stormwater.
Stormwater, right. Yep.
My terrace is 18 inches. That's all it is.
You want some more? I got plenty. Well, so your motion then would be to approve.
Our recommendation would be to approve consistent with the cost shown in the worksheet.
The
Okay.
104?
Well, it would be the 104 if it's 5 minutes worth of time, 185 if it's 30 minutes worth of time, and 282 if it was an hour's worth of time.
Now, if you
Believe
did
it or not, we
one
get
time-
some pretty substantial, we get folks who cut their grass, bag it, and leave it at the curb every time they cut. There are some pretty substantial piles out there at times.
Hmm.
I take my own, I dump my own.
I
You know,
compost.
or
Got a
compost.
4x8 trailer
I mean-
that gets full every time.
So, in a case like this, you would, I guess, if we approve this, is it under the understanding that there would still be a warning? And then-
Well, again, we don't
You don't-
necessarily give a warning, we issue the invoice if somebody contests.
Then they have to contest it.
Correct.
And some people will, some won't.
Right.
And will they come to us, our committee, generally?
Generally speaking, the first offense, if we handle that at a staff level.
But if it happens again, then they would come here.
A second offense, we would not rescind at a staff level, then we would offer them the opportunity to come to improvement service committee and plead their case here.
All right.
Well,
Well-
but there has to be some kind of warning to let them know that this is changing.
Well, they handle it in staff, in-house.
I mean, a general some, you know, the website, probably in the newspaper, something?
Well, this is consistent with what our information has been for years. It's
Right.
just we're seeking to enforce
Just,
it at this point.
just this,
Well, that's what I mean. Because if you don't enforce it, then really it's not a rule. I mean, I'm just being honest. People do it and they don't get any kind of repercussion. So they need to be, well, we're actually gonna enforce it, you know, like what, out of,
ignorance
so they start
is
getting
no-
invoices, that's not the time to really know that it's being enforced, I guess.
But you're right, we are a little spoiled at times.
And I just want to say, I think one of the most constructive things that we post is, and I don't remember when or how many times it goes out, the city talks about how to separate your garbage and all that. I mean, that letter to me is somewhat your guide to the warning, to the, you know what I mean? To go, this is what you do. And I think it's, I haven't seen it, I've got it like posted, like put that there so if we ever got a question, we can look at it, you know? That's just my wife and I, but how many people do it? They might just throw it away, you know? And I think, do they actually send something out yet annually with
Not
changes?
this year, I think was the first year that we didn't make a print copy
Okay.
of the
We have
services
print
guide.
copies, but we only use them for public meetings, like neighborhood association meetings.
no.
and,
Print
people
copies are
stop in,
available.
We'll give them new residents.
But I think that's a,
Print copies are available at the garages, they're also available here at City Hall, but the services guide is on the city's website
yeah.
under DPW,
Right.
as are the recycling calendars and
And they talk about
bulk
that.
collection week calendars and that
A
kind
lot
of
of
stuff.
people don't have a computer.
Oh,
I know.
that's
Yeah,
another
well,
meeting.
I know we've gotten the printed one and I would keep it handy.
Yeah, I have that too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
All right.
It's part of it that keeps, saves money, time, you know?
Okay, committee, what are your pleasures on this? Anybody want to bring a motion?
I'm gonna make a motion that we take action
Okay.
on passing it as
Yes, so-
stated.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Campbell makes the motion, second by Heck. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I know there's, staff is here, but for all you folks out there, this goes to city council next Tuesday.
All those folks.
Just
Say.
yeah, for all of you out
Travis.
there. All right, number 3, consideration with possible action on the report of the 2023.
Oh,
report-
2.
Oh, 2.
gonna
Excuse
say,
me.
yeah,
Wow, I'm getting
I
excited.
just noticed the map, I'm sorry, I'm getting
Yeah,
distracted.
I'm looking at that map too. It's great. Thank you for the board. I can't help it. Number 2, consideration with possible action on a request by the Department of Public Works to enter into an intergovernmental cooperative agreement with Brown County for 2023 staff.
Okay, included in your packet is a intergovernmental agreement, cooperative agreement to satisfy eligibility for the Wisconsin Recycling Consolidation Grant for calendar year 2023. Since Brown County started managing solid waste on behalf of all county municipalities back in 1975, there have been several solid waste management agreements that municipalities have entered into with Brown County. With the advent of banning recyclables from the solid waste stream starting in the early 90s, Brown County has also managed recyclables on behalf of the municipalities. Most recently, in 2020, we executed amendment number 11 to the longstanding recycling agreement we've had between the city and Brown County. That agreement had Brown County listed as the responsible unit for recycling. Wisconsin DNR has recently opined that Brown County cannot be the RU. The municipalities have to be the RU. We can still contract with Brown County to manage the material, but the agreement has to clearly identify the municipalities
Each
as
one.
being the RU. So, this agreement clarifies the agreement from 2020, which is currently in effect. So all we're looking to do is authorize this agreement, which will then supersede the 2020 agreement,
Okay.
clearly identifying the city as being the RU.
Right.
So this is procedural. It changes nothing as far as the relationship between the city and Brown County. and this is entirely consistent with how we've operated with the county since recycling started in the early 90s.
So you get to say something?
What's that?
This is one notch on your lipstick case
Well-
then, or what?
No.
You're the boss? Okay.
Well,
How long did
it's-
this take? I mean, how long was that in place before people said, well, wait a minute, we gotta get all the cameras?
This just came up recently here in,
Legal? Was it a legal matter?
this came from WDNR.
Oh, okay.
DNR, that's why I was like, but if it was
Yep.
working,
So, yeah, it's
it
just.
doesn't make sense, but.
Just
okay.
interesting how it came forward, and I understand that sometimes you have to spell it out a little bit more, so
It's been
I would-
going on, but okay.
I would entertain a motion.
A motion to approve?
Motion by Eck, do we have a second?
Second?
Second by Campbell, any other discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed, that passes unanimously. Now can I go to 3?
Yes.
Thank you. Consideration with possible action on the report of the 2023 Department of Public Works Equipment Acquisition Process. That's
So,
staff.
included in the packet is a 2-page table. This table dates back to when we used to fund equipment replacement, major equipment replacement, that we used to have a line item in the budget, the operating budget, that was city equipment usage. So every time that a piece of equipment rolled out of the shop and was used for something, so a tool cat, a dump truck, a loader, a grader, every time that equipment went out the door, we would log the time that it was used, and then we would essentially charge ourselves a fraction of the state rate. They refer to it as Blue Book rate. The state publishes every year what an owning and operating cost for equipment is. And we would charge ourselves a portion of that rate, and that money would come out of the budget and go into a capital account. And then that way that money was there and available when we needed to buy or replace equipment. So what we would do is we would come forward, because these pieces of equipment weren't necessarily listed out individually in the budget process, we would come to committee and identify what equipment we were intending to purchase in the upcoming year from the money that we had stockpiled the previous year through operation. A couple of years ago, a decision was made that that equipment actually represented a capital cost, and it was more appropriate to bond for and pay for it over the life of the equipment as opposed to using the operating budget. So we are now borrowing money to purchase this equipment. But again, this equipment, even though it is part of the capital improvement, the 5-year capital improvement program, when the Finance Committee gets together and will discuss the capital program for 2023, if you read through that 700-page document, all of this equipment is in there. We're simply coming forward and identifying the equipment by division and funding source of what we're intending to purchase next year.
Committee, any questions? No.
Not really.
Can I take one, I need to take 1 minute.
You drink
Get
water?
a drink.
Mm-hmm.
1 minute? I'm excited when these numbers are doing it to me. Any chance?
You're on the clock.
I like the idea of putting it away for future rather than having to bond for it.
Ideally, if we can, we would like to move back to that. It's what our budget will support.
So you're gonna propose that?
Not in this budget cycle.
Yeah, right now the decision's been made that if it's value is less, is 5,000, over 5,000, it's a capital item. So obviously it doesn't mean that at 5,000 and $5,200 items could be bonded for, but they picked a cutoff. But you'll see in our request, anything that's basically 5,000 or less, we're just requesting through the regular budget process. And then typically there's a big gap because above $5,000, you're into a trailer with a power unit on it for 20, 30,000, or a truck or a garbage truck that's 300,000. So, you know, there's a big gap there. So it's
Disposable.
relatively clear.
More disposable.
Is that standard operating procedure in a sense to the way you're doing this? over
Well,
time?
and
Or you-
it's kind of a little bit of a mixed bag. The levy-supported equipment on the front, we're currently bonding for. Sanitary, storm, and traffic, we continue to have a line item in those utilities that's called transfer to capital. And that's part of that transfer to capital is we still continue to use our operating funds to put money into that capital account for equipment replacement. It's just the levy hasn't been able to support that for the last several years. And I think if you talk to the finance director, she would tell you that ideally that we would like to get back to paying for things in real time. It's whether or not we can find that. There was a budget deficit of about $2 million 5-6 years ago. And in order to do that, we took the equipment, which not so coincidentally came out to about $2 million, to help shore up the budget without having to have a massive mill rate increase. So if we can work some of that over time back into the operating budget, I think finance would not necessarily be opposed to that either. Now, the other thing that's on there is the second page of this is equipment that's less than $5,000 in value that we are proposing to ask for in our budget request. So this is budget supported, the second page. By approving this tonight, this does not obligate you. What it does is it gives us guidance on, you are in concurrence for us to ask for this in our budget request.
All right.
After we actually get to the budget deliberations, then the 12 on the council will have to make decisions as to whether or not these things stay in or other
Do
finances.
you need this step just to get to that?
Correct.
point? Okay.
So what we're doing is we're asking for your approval for us to seek bonding for some of this, budget for the rest, and then whether we get it or not is
Yeah.
part of the budgeting or bonding process.
And I think that when you talk about budgeting, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say motion to approve.
Okay, we can do that. I guess the comment I had to make was that, you know, we bond for things, some things are on the levy per se, and just trying to find out what the efficient matter of doing that. You know, a lot of times when we bond for things, it's over a long period of time. You don't want to bond for things that don't, you know, the price changes.
Correct.
Right,
Well,
so,
when you were getting your drink, that's what I said, I would rather
Yeah.
see it where they do put the money into, like they were doing, but he said they're not planning to do that for this budget season, but possibly the next.
right, try to stay ahead of the game. Because
Yeah,
you
kind
know,
of
a
a
lot of times we
savings.
have bonded in the past for things, and it's like, sometimes the life of we're still paying on the bond after the equipment is no good.
That's what I heard
And
about the police department,
that's
some of the
kinda hard.
cars are gonna outlast how much we owe them longer than they
Right.
last, yeah.
That's just a concern I think that council has, that we all have, but, you know, if we can, you feel, Steve, that this will at least keep the conversation well for all
Correct.
of us. Okay, so Alderette, did you have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Okay.
Second.
Second by Campbell, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed? All right. Number 4, consideration with possible action on a request by the Department of Public Works to rescind the award of GBPD Police Department 1-22 Police Station re-roof, to Crafts Inc. In the amount of $110,081 and award the contract to Northern Metal and Roofing in the amount of $130,205. Staff.
So this was one that we just awarded 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
And it
I
went
was
to
gonna
council
say.
last week.
Right?
Subsequent to the award, staff reached out to get the contract executed, and Crafts indicated to us they could not meet the deadline that was in the specification, and they wanted the city to waive a liquidated damages clause, which we cannot do. So with those two conditions in the contract, Crafts did not want to sign the contract, they didn't want to enter into a contract. So we're asking to rescind and award to the second low bidder, which this makes Crafts a non-responsive bid.
Right. If they would have signed that, they would have been liable for.
They would have been
some fees.
obligated to meet both the construction schedule and should something happen that would meet the meet the criteria for liquidated damage, they would have been liable for liquidated damages.
So in a ballpark figure, what would they come out to, let's say, if they had to pay damages that way, if they couldn't?
Well, it's on a
relative.
cost per day overrun.
So is this a light contract with Northern Metal then, or was it totally renegotiated? Or-
No, these were the bids that were received, so
Oh.
we're just
Oh,
going to the second
everybody had the
bidder.
same.
I thought there was only one bid on it
No, that was,
originally.
I think you're thinking of the fence, but there was no bid. Or no, it was too
Yeah,
high. It was
we
too high.
there are contracts that we receive that only get one bid, but in this case, we actually had three.
Okay.
And you've worked with Northern before?
Yes.
Yeah, pretty reputable.
Yeah.
Okay. Staff?
I'm gonna make a motion to approve.
Yep.
Motion by Campbell,
Second.
second by Eck to approve. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, that passes unanimously. Number 5, consideration with possible action on a review and award of contract Legends District Sidewalk Phase 1. Staff?
This one, I think we got some some staff turnover at the administrative section within our office, and we kind of jumped the gun a little bit on this. The Legends District Sidewalk is a TID-supported project, so the actual awarding authority would be the redevelopment authority.
Okay.
And this did go through RDA yesterday and was approved.
Okay.
So we would simply ask INS to receive and place on file because action had already been taken by the RDA.
Oh, so we just didn't receive and place on file?
Yep, just to receive and place on file would be
Okay.
appropriate.
Motion to receive and place on file.
By Eck,
Second.
do we have a second? By Campbell, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, that passes unanimously. Informational Director's Report on recent activities.
2 items for you tonight. First of which, you're hearing it here first. We have set the dates for a fall loose leaf collection. Fall loose leaf collection will be October 24th through November 25th.
And
That is
That's
what?
the day when you pick up your garbage, is that week of, oh, go ahead.
Well, this is when
I
you
was
can
gonna-
put,
I don't
this is
think
when you
there's-
can put leaves and yard waste out for collection at the curb. And these
Right, but
collections
I
will
was
be
saying the
RDA.
last week that you do it, you'll pick it up the last week of your cycle, per se? Like,
Ideally, we tend to run it, but
Okay,
we will make at least 5 passes through the city.
right, okay.
This is a week shorter than we've done in the past, and the reason we feel comfortable with that
Window, you
is
mean? Window of it?
the window,
Yeah.
yes. This is only, I believe, a 5-week window as opposed to 6. We've held the end date, but shortened up the front end, because what we found over the years is that front end, we weren't getting a lot of leaves at the front end of it. Things hadn't fallen yet. So we were taking the entire first week, and we were only spending 2 days of that week picking up leaf piles. So in order to get more summer-type work done, keeping those crews tasked with those types of activities for an additional week was probably more beneficial for the city. And we're just going to shorten the window up. We think we're still going to get through the rotations with no problems.
More bang for your buck.
Yes.
Yes.
I like that.
I'm writing it.
And the end date, we have to be cognizant of that end date. We've received a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, a lot of input over the years about can't you go another week or so on the tail end. The problem with that is this is typically black that we've done. If we go longer than that, from the time we start, because the same vehicles we use for collecting are the ones we use for plowing. Once we start conversion of the fleet, start to finish, it's about a 3-week process to convert the fleet to winter activity. Anytime after Thanksgiving, we are on borrowed time as far as a snow event. And we can't have 60 pieces of equipment that are not ready to plow when the snow comes.
Yeah.
So although we understand, there's only so much we can do. Now, with that in mind, these are the official dates. To the extent that we can, we won't make promises beyond November 25th. So that's the official end. If time, weather, and equipment allows, instead of using the trucks and the loaders, we do still have our pans, which are the old rear load garbage trucks that have the pan that drops down in the back. And tractors, we will go out and pick up to the extent that we can, beyond that 25th date, but we make no guarantee. If you want it picked up, make sure you have it out before then.
Without the fee schedule.
Correct.
Yeah. But you've done that before,
yeah.
too.
Yeah, we always
We've
have,
done-
it's
we've
just
done
we
that.
See how they did that?
We used to have a tree that the leaves wouldn't come down until after it snowed. Then they would all go on top of
And
the.
you
Well,
want to go up in that tree and rake them.
I have oaks that didn't lose their leaves until January last year.
Yeah, so
So
you're
the
kind of
street
stuck.
sweepers.
It's
but-
not your fault.
The second item I wanted to bring to your attention is we met with a service vendor a couple of weeks ago relative to our sidewalk program. And this vendor offers a combination of professional services and contract services. So what they will do is they'll come in to an area, do the physical inspection of the sidewalk to identify what, we give them our criteria for evaluation. They come in and they'll do the inspection. And anything that's a trip hazard, so if you got offset panels that constitute a trip hazard, they have the ability, it's not really grinding, it's actually a horizontal sawing that they do. But in essence, it's like grinding the lip off, okay? They can actually do the grinding or sawing as well. So they'll come in, do the evaluation, grind anything or cut anything that can be cut to eliminate the trip hazards, and then they compile a list of those panels that they can't take care of for us to include in our sidewalk contract for the following year. By doing the cutting, you're able to leave that existing concrete slab in there. You're not replacing a slab just because there's a trip hazard there.
It's thinner though. I mean, you're taking something.
Correct. Well, a lot of times these offsets, if it's more than a 2-inch offset, then they won't do it because you're removing half of the thickness of the concrete panel. So there are some conditions that go along with it. How would we know that a program like this would work except for taking them at their word? So what we are doing is we are going to conduct a pilot study yet this fall. So what I've done is worked with them to identify, they can do about 2,500 lineal feet of inspection and take corrective action, and that will be about a $15,000 expenditure on behalf of the city. So we figured $15,000 and about a half mile of sidewalk will be a good opportunity for us to do that and get a sense for whether or not this kind of an approach might be something that would work and be less costly to homeowners who have sidewalk impact. So we're going ahead with that pilot study, and we're funding it out of the sidewalk replacement.
Okay, well directed.
Is that on the city sidewalks then? Are you doing it on residential or are you doing it on the city sidewalks?
No, we're actually gonna do it in residential area.
Okay. Well, because my understanding is there's a lot of city sidewalks that need help.
Yeah, we've gone through that.
I heard.
Yeah, so what areas would be chosen per se?
The area that we selected is one that we get probably the most complaints on, and that's around Astor Park. That's an old established area within the city and a lot of large mature trees that are causing sidewalks to be heaved. So this type of approach, that Astor Park area is really kind of in the sweet spot for this type of activity.
Have you talked to Alder Galvin?
We have not yet.
Okay, you're waiting till, because I know.
Yeah.
Alder,
Well, you know,
I know.
Really?
this is kind of a additional note that it's kind of like a catch-22. We want the trees, but the trees are what's causing all the problem with the
Correct.
sidewalks. So people with the sidewalks have to pay because they've got trees, but the city put the trees in.
Yep.
And trust me, I heard it when I was going knocking on doors talking to people. I just don't know what the solution is, but maybe pushing the trees in. Our trees are way in, but there are trees. We don't even have any city trees, nor do we have sidewalks. So we don't have that problem, but I just feel like it's kind of like it's a little bit, it's unfair, somewhat.
It would
to
be
homeowners.
nice to see how this works too, how you you know, like, here's the situation, here's what it looks like, this is what it's done, and look at before and after. I'd like to see that.
Well, that's why we wanted to do a pilot study.
Right.
And somebody may wind up getting a freebie out of this, who otherwise would have been charged. But we need to be able to do the pilot study to evaluate whether or not it works. And if we're going to assess that cost back to the property owner, then there are statutory regulations where we have to provide them notice, give them the opportunity to correct that. There's no way we get the pilot study done. So somebody might be getting, but this is really no different than when, it's a kind of a parallel situation to when we have a street like Country Club Road, okay? Country Club Road is gonna be 80% funded by DOT and 20% funded by the city. So back in the day when we levied special assessments, property owners were only being assessed on that 20% instead of on 100%. It's just the luck of the draw on what
Wow.
project we got some contributory funding towards. Same thing here, we need to do the pilot study, we actually need to find an area where it's gonna make a difference. We can really assess whether or not the program's gonna work.
So how many linear feet are you talking?
About 2,500, roughly a half
So
mile.
you're looking at about a half mile.
Yeah,
So a half mile, and there's a number of roads that you could do.
right.
Well, in a way, so it's the same company that's assessing whether it needs to be done that are gonna be doing the work. It kind of checks and balances.
Well,
Or not.
They're not checks and balances, right?
we are working with them, and they're gonna have to work off of our criteria, and they have to provide us with their inspection information before they do the work. So yeah, they can't just go out, if, again, because all they're doing is the sawing or grinding. Oh, this sidewalk needed to be, and we go out there and we look, and it's grown back that far. No, that one, you didn't have to do. It's very easy for us, even after the fact, to go and take a look at the work they did and see whether or not that qualified.
The only concern that I would think in concrete laying is, you know, you got that floated surface, and when they saw it, is it gonna bring up the stones and the gravel, which is now down the road gonna create popping?
Well,
I mean, that's just,
you may have exposed aggregate.
right?
Matter of fact, you will. There's no way to avoid
Yeah, I
that.
mean, you can see it when you
However-
grind the street.
Well, taking a look at driveway aprons, the old way of doing a driveway apron was they would cut the curb head off, and then they would pour just the curb, leave the gutter in place, and they would pour the curb, what we call a driveway lip, to match the driveway apron. Recently, within the past 10 to 12 years, with the advance in the horizontal sawing techniques, a lot of contractors will come in now and they will profile cut the curb head to match the driveway lip curb, which has the same thing. You're cutting a 6-inch curb down to 1.5 inches. So you're removing 4.5 inches of curb head off.
Yeah, but you're not walking on it.
No, you're driving over it.
On an apron.
And what we're seeing is a lot of that profile cut curb is lasting better. It's wearing better than
The floated surface.
than a cast in place curb head. So we're not overly concerned that the cutting is going to prematurely damage the sidewalk.
Well, and you know, they're doing a lot of inside building floors now where they pour it and then they just grind it to a
Right.
finish.
And
Yes.
We we allow residents, currently, we allow residents to take this very approach, to correct the sidewalk themselves before we replace it. So I was just out, I'm trying to remember where the gentleman lives. He's down in the stadium district, I remember that. And he was out there with a 7-inch grinder with a masonry head on it. And he was removing the trip hazards by getting down on his hands and knees, and he was just grinding them off, which is perfectly acceptable.
Did you prove that? and
Yeah.
inspect that? Okay. cool.
Yeah, and the worst case scenario, it's the property owner's responsibility. If they grind it, and 5 years down the road it fails, they have to replace it then, or they replace it now. Why not give them the opportunity to do something lower cost, and if it lasts for 20 years, they're money ahead.
Is it a significant savings for doing that versus replacing the cement?
That's one of the things we're hoping to gather out of
The pilots.
the pilot study.
I
Well,
mean,
that'd be
see,
good.
it would make sense that it would, but I just wondered.
And they typically,
Or not, right.
do pilot studies for about $2,000, and I told them, $2,000, we're not gonna learn anything. You're gonna make it 500 feet, okay? We need an area. I need to be able to see what you can do and how impactful it is. So we push that up to 15, so we get a meaningful pilot
Is
study.
it a contiguous area? 'Cause
Yes.
Okay. Like
Of course, you only have the visual of being done, not 5 years down the road, but.
Correct.
I think it sounds like a great.
Yeah, that's great, and I know we talked about ARPA funds for maybe sidewalk replacement. We had a couple of different scenarios, and you went through a long kind of diatribe about sidewalks being the citizens' responsibility, et cetera, et cetera.
The most misunderstood.
It
That's what he
is.
said.
It's a very tough topic for citizens. You know, a lot of times the citizen will say, hey, I need some replacements. And you go out there and it might be that much off. You gotta, the city will replace these 3, but these other 8 you gotta replace. And they don't like to hear that, so a lot of times, I don't know. I'm just hoping as time goes on that we can come up with some good solutions. So
Mhm.
maybe this will be the.
Well, that's one of the reasons we
that's
want to
one
do
of
the
the-
pilot studies.
All right.
Let's see how this works. Is this something that could potentially be another tool in the toolbox we can offer to residents that's lower cost than ripping out otherwise competent sidewalk, and get that stuff to last a little
Do you
longer.
have a time frame on this roughly?
They would like to do it yet this year.
Oh,
What did you say, October? Yeah.
Are they local or state?
yeah, we're at Hortonville. Hortonville, it's pretty local. Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, good job on that.
And do they offer the replacement side of it too? Do they have different
Nope.
levels of it, just the
No,
sign?
they only do the cutting.
Okay.
And again, if it's something
It's,
can't be corrected with the cutting, if it's excessive cracking, excessive surface flowing, if it's a settlement or too much grade on the sidewalk or would need to be replaced or project or something else, they will prepare quantities for us to put into our contract, our normal sidewalk replacement contract, but they won't actually do that work. Their bread and butter is doing the inspection and then correcting the trip hazards.
all right. Anything else?
No,
All right.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, now let's do the next Improvement and Services meeting is scheduled for
sorry.
October 12th, 2022. I don't believe we have any public hearings.
Nope.
Motion to adjourn by
Motion.
Eck, seconded by
Second.
Campbell. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Great, thank you all.
30 seconds.
Leave
to
meeting.
2 hours.